Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. It's me, your host, Patrick Van Straten. And if this is your first time listening to us or watching us, then please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Head over to Twitter and subscribe to our Twitter feed for lots of updates on upcoming transfers. And of course, make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter, which has all the best analysis this summer. Today, I'm joined by my podcast co-host, Ravi Ramaneni. How are you, Ravi?
Hey, Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm good. We're nearly there. We're nearly at the end. Thank God. I don't know if you're as fatigued as I am. I think that you're are you not a long distance runner, Ravi?
Well, good thing you asked about it. Like, I am a long distance runner, but I'm in Houston. For those that some of them already know, the weather sort of turned at the end of last week to the better. So we've had probably every day we woke up at 6 a.m. with 95% humidity every day for like the last 3 months, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like 27, somewhere around there.
Great.
And then last couple of days have been nice. And so I thought today I'm going to do like a harder run, which is usually some intervals running a little fast for about half a mile at a time, take a few minutes off. And then I went out and it was just as bad. So two things happened. One of the things that happens always with runners is that you always tend to overestimate what you can do. Oh, I can do that speed, or I can do that pace. I can do 6 instead of 8, or 8 instead of 6. So you end up overestimating what you could do. And then I also underestimated how bad the weather was going to be, like the conditions to run. So it was a very tough run this morning, but it's okay.
You'll be missing it once you're losing fingers running in East Coast snow. You'll be missing that. You'll be trying to run back to Houston.
For sure. I think that we are also leaving right around, this is the best time of the year Starting in Houston, like end of August, early September through April is the best part of the year. But anyway, I think we've had our fix of hot weather.
I'm going out to seek some next week. I'm on holiday next week. You and I will be taking some time off over the next couple of weeks, but there'll be plenty of great content coming up. We've got transfer grades where we'll be going through and rating different teams' transfer business over the course of the summer. But the window's not quite shut yet, and there are some moves coming up kind of out of nowhere. One that came up out of nowhere this week was Federico Chiesa, who is now off to Liverpool for a fee that is supposedly about £11 million, something like that, which is, to my mind, crazy value. We were talking about him earlier in the window at the end of July, I think, and the rumored fee was 2025. That's been cut in half, and of course, Liverpool, being the smart team that they are, thought, yeah, we'll go and grab this guy. What do you think about the fit of Chiesa for Liverpool, Ravi?
I think he just has 1 year left in his contract. And I would say in terms of the price, generally when the price is so low, you wonder what the wages look like, because as a club, as somebody running the club, most of them generally look at what is cost per year. So you amortize the transfer plus what the salary is going to be over the years. So usually they look at players financially. Teams look at the squad in terms of how much this player costs me per year, how much this player costs me per year. If a player X is costing me 5 million per year all in, if I'm not going to renew him, usually what happens is I just bring in somebody in the same salary slot or same kind of cost slot. So it's something that North American sports are very used to doing, because they always look at these slots, 1 in, 1 out, 2 in, 2 out type thing, where how much room I'm creating on the cap or the salary budget and what players I'm bringing in. So I don't know. Obviously, it could be that his salary is pretty high, so it might even out, but still it's a good price.
I think the rumor was that that Juventus were happy to shift him because supposedly he was on about 7 million a year, something like that, which I guess that's what, 140 a week, something like that. So for Liverpool, that feels quite doable in a way that for Italy, that's really up at the top of the range.
Yeah, for sure. And also he was also being played in a system where his skills were not being really used well. I think in Juve.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a very technical right-footed winger playing on the left side, cuts inside, creates chances, shoots, can create his own shot, but sometimes that's also a double-edged sword. Like, he does take some kind of wild shots or like shots low quality, but he is a good dribbler, and he definitely, I think, fit-wise, if you have to go back to Fiorentina where he played a little differently. I think you mentioned it in the before the show. And so what that shows is that he can adapt to playing different roles. I think last year he even played a little bit of wing back, which shows a couple things. One being that he's quite adaptable to playing different roles to get on the field. And number two is also someone that probably not that gets upset that he doesn't get to play in his favorite role. So playing as a wing back, being a winger like that, I think is not that difficult. I think if you look at it, but obviously different players look at it differently. So I think for Liverpool, he will. To me, he walks into the group as the backup for Luis Diaz on the left side. However, his game is very different from Luis Diaz. And so I think that gives Liverpool the opportunity to have a variety, throw a different look at a different type of opposition. Let's say if they're playing somebody really a low block team and you don't have a lot of space to run in behind, someone like him that's a really good dribbler can open things up, take guys on 1v1 and create some angles and passes. That may be one way to use him. The other thing is also one aspect of Arne Slot's management seems to be that he does make early subs. Like, he wants to use his full roster. I don't know if you watched the game this past weekend. He took out Trent around 77th or 75th, and Trent wasn't happy. And and then they shot to the dugout area, where Arne was sitting next to Trent and talking to him, because Trent kind of was sulky when he walked off the field and just went and sat down in his spot. Anyway, that's an aside, but I think he looks like someone who wants to use the full depth of the squad. So having another player that's starting caliber that can come in and play, albeit slightly differently than a Luis Diaz, I think that gives a lot of flexibility for Liverpool.
And I think I completely agree with you. I think the best Chiesa, as Kim has said in the newsletter, is the Chiesa that's playing off the left, that's coming inside and getting shots. That is the Chiesa we saw of that last season at Fiorentina. It's the Chiesa we saw of the first season in Juventus. And these were the seasons where his shot numbers were healthy and he put up really good expected goal numbers. You pointed out that he's become more of an expected assist guy over the last few years, which I think probably is a product of playing different roles. Now, I don't want him. I don't think the best way to maximize him is to put him on the right. But if you do have a system where your right back is stepping into midfield, then your right winger kind of has to hold the width. And that feels a bit weird when your right winger is Mo Salah, because he can do it, but it's not where he does the most damage. Well, having Chiesa in that situation, who does have experience of playing as a wing back and maybe is a bit less bothered about getting his shots when he plays there, would that kind of make sense as a fit in that situation?
I think as a change, I think it definitely, he looks like a player that is adaptable, that can play different roles. And in a team like, if he walks into a team like Liverpool from Juventus, where he was being played a little bit out of position, but he's now going into a higher profile team, I think he will do everything to get on the field. And I think that to what you pointed out, being on the right side, where if Trent comes inside, then him staying wide and holding the width, I think that's another thing that, while it probably wasn't used as much at Juve, I think it could be a really good really good way to use him at Liverpool.
An interesting thing about this is that it feels like Liverpool's attack now has quite a lot of relatively low touch guys in it. Like Diaz and Salah are the guys who are on the ball the most. And after that, Jota is a kind of inside forward rather than a winger, right? Nunez, obviously very low touch. It feels like all his touches are shots. Gakpo, not on the ball that much. I don't think, personally, I don't want him on the ball that much because I don't like him. And Chiesa is relatively low touch too. So when it comes to fitting these guys together, I look at Chiesa and I'm not sure I want Chiesa and Nunez on the field at the same time. And an interesting thing that's come out of this move, and again, Kim wrote about it in the newsletter, was the possibility that Liverpool would want to move somebody on. They've now got Diaz, Jota, Gakpo, Chiesa, Nunez, Salah, plus Elliott, plus Szoboszlai. A lot of depth in these attacking roles. And the thought was maybe they'd be willing to move Nunez on. How would you feel about the prospect of them putting Nunez on the market? Because he's kind of a stats darling, but he is undeniably a frustrating player if he plays for your team, I think.
Yeah, he is. I think, first of all, I think for a move of this size and this magnitude to happen, I just don't think there's enough hours left in the window to pull this off. I honestly feel if this is really were to happen, I think we would have heard a lot more sooner about this. That's my take on whether the move will happen or not. But just thinking about it, I think if obviously he hasn't played much in the first two games, but that could be because he's coming back from Copa America, and I think Arne Slot's slowly easing those players in, and he wasn't participant in the preseason as much in their US tour. So yeah, there could be that. So we probably can't read too much into that. Now, to the rumors and to what if that is indeed true that Arne doesn't fancy him as a player that he wants to depend on as his core player, it's always advisable to make the move sooner than later. Because if he's going to sit on the bench for 6 more months or until December, then the value will only go down. And also, that in the January window, the sums of money that you exchange or that we see are not quite as much as what we see during the summer window. So there is definitely like a downside to keeping him to just especially if the decision is made or if they're set that, well, I don't think he's in my long-term plans. Like if all that is done, then yes, I think moving now makes more sense. But I also think that the way we mentioned it in the previous podcast, how Arne has been very deliberate, or the way they have not really made any moves this year because the squad looks pretty set. And obviously there's the 3 big contract extensions looming, or decisions looming for Salah, Trent, and Van Dijk. But still, I think there seems to be this idea that I think he wants to give a chance to everyone to prove whether they can work in his system or not. So if we go by that logic, it does seem like a hurried move because if you think that Arne hasn't seen him in the preseason, and he's only probably has been training for the last 3 weeks with the team fully. So then it makes like that, it doesn't hold. I mean, both can't be true. Now, if there is any other personality issues or something that came up, obviously we wouldn't know that. But I do feel like the likelihood of this happening is low, very low now, likelihood of this happening now.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's quite unlikely to happen now. But I don't think it would be terribly surprising if at some stage Liverpool said he is not like a must pick. Like last season, his numbers they're kind of astonishing. I think it was 21.5 expected goals and assists in 22 and a bit 90s. Like it's crazy stuff. It's up at like 0.95 per 90. And 19 actual goals. So a slight underperformance, but still, like 19 goals in the league, you don't throw that away for nothing. Like that's pretty special stuff. Book value probably still at about 50 mil, something like that. So it would have to be a pretty healthy offer for them to get rid of him.
The other point to add to that is like they also need to have a replacement lined up, or do we think that, well, he's gonna just make do with the rest of the guys for 6 months? I don't think that's gonna work, as you said, with 19 goals. Like, no matter what you can say about his kind of streaks of finishing at times could be maddening, where the kind of misses he has, but I think he gets into really great situations. From the front, I think he opens a lot of things up for Diaz and Salah as well, like with his pressing. So I also see, like, one thing is, okay, if they decided to move on from him, and the reason I say it's too late now is just because they may not have someone lined up to replace him.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I just don't think value goes down, obviously, if a player doesn't play. But I don't think it's that he won't play at all. I think he'll play plenty, honestly. And also, we've seen a lot of players who you'd have thought their value would go down. But when they've got a track record of playing and scoring and assisting in the Premier League, it doesn't go down that much. Like Havertz went for about 7 million less than Chelsea paid for him. Somebody like Pedro Neto, I mean, obviously he was going to Chelsea, so all bets are off when it comes to that evaluation. But he went for top dollar, kind of the highest prices we've been talking about. So even if he didn't play that much this season, I'd still expect him to get, I think not that much is probably 1,500 minutes. And that probably means double figures for goals and assists.
Yeah.
I think that they could probably sell it. If they're looking at a 50 million plus add-on selling fee, I'm pretty certain they could get that next season as well. But Kim's idea that maybe Arsenal would be interested in a player like this, because that's been a rumour that's been floating around football Twitter, is an interesting one, because we just talked about that depth that Liverpool have in attack. Arsenal do not have that kind of depth, right?
Yeah, no, they don't.
Yeah.
I think that, as you were talking about earlier, like, they have, 6 players for 4 spots, on the front 4.
Mm-hmm. It feels like Arsenal, they've got, well, and the thing is, Arteta doesn't trust very easily. There are managers like Klopp last season, and his hand was forced by injury, but Klopp said, I'm going to give some of these youngsters chances. I'm going to play Bradley and I'm going to play Kwanzaa, like, in positions of need. Arteta has not really got a track record of that. Now, there's talk he's going to use Nwaneri this season, who's more of a kind of 8 attacking midfielder, something like that. But that doesn't solve the problem in the real positions of need, which is that Arsenal have Trossard and Martinelli for the left wing. Up top, they have Havertz and Jesus. For the right, they have Saka. And technically, they still have Reece Nelson. And then in attacking midfield, they've got Odegaard and maybe Nwaneri. And this is quite troubling. Like, this is not a lot of players. And some of those guys who are second choice in one position could end up being first choice in another position if there's an injury there. It's quite a concerning thing for them to do, right? When it last year, best underlying numbers in the league, a real shot, which is the first time we've seen that really in the Pep era at City, a real shot to go one further this year. Mm-hmm. And while City you could argue they've slightly downgraded their front line because they're a bit less injury proof at centre forward with Alvarez going, they've still gone 1 in, 1 out. Alvarez goes, Savinho comes in. Well, Arsenal have gone Nketiah out, Smith Rowe out, Fabio Vieira out.
Although Smith Rowe hasn't played much last season, I think, in the Premier League, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then you can also imagine in eight games in a Champions League group stage, maybe Smith Rowe soaks up a couple of those games and you get to play, Martinelli more in the Premier League or something.
Yeah, I was going to make the point about 8-game Champions League group stage earlier too, with Chiesa and Darwin Nunez at Liverpool. I think it applies to Arsenal as well. So I think, like, if you look at it, it's like, to make a deal, you need to have, in this case, all 3 parties agree, at least 2 of them being fully agreed so they can convince the third party. I think if you have to say at the outset, I think maybe just Arsenal would be interested in this deal, probably the most interested party of the 3 in the deal, right? Because they will add depth to where they have a need. Whereas the other 2, I think it feels, I don't know what Nunez feels about moving, from Liverpool to Arsenal, but for Liverpool, it's 2 things. One is, well, it may be too late to get a replacement. Number 2, that also means it's a bit of a PR thing because they haven't really made a lot of signings, and if they sold one of their top goal scorers from the previous season, what does that mean, like, to show to the fans in terms of what their ambition is, even though they may have a plan? and it may all work out, but on August 30th, it probably doesn't look as nice. So I think in among the three, I think Arsenal probably, if you put this in front of them, they're probably like, yeah, we would be interested in this, because for them it's just okay. We're gonna also the other thing we haven't talked about is it's a direct rival, so we're gonna weaken a direct rival, take out a starter, and we're gonna add to to increase our depth. So yeah, I think that to me is like, it's definitely something for Arsenal very favorable, or like something that they would love to explore, or they would even want to make a deal if all things line up. But the other two parties may not be as keen.
Agreed. And I think as well, Liverpool next summer, if they do have two or maybe even all three of those star players leaving, that'll free up a lot of salary space, but it won't give them a lot of cash on hand. Whereas if at that point they also were to sell Nunez for 50 million or whatever, then that gives them a nice big kind of write-off that that they could before they go ahead with a big spending spree, which you assume they would have to go on to replace a guy who's been their best player for the best part of a decade now, the best centre back of the Premier League, and their star peak age right back as well. With Arsenal. Oh, go on. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, the other thing is also, like, for teams like the top teams like Liverpool, Arsenal, City, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern, if for them to replace 4, 3, 5 players at that level, like starters, to replace them, it's a huge risk to do all of that in one window. You want to have the continuity. You want to have the success, like where you are taking one or two pieces out, adding one or two pieces into, because first of all, it's also hard to find so many top end players and be able to close the deals for so many top players that can come in and start for your team at that level. If this was a mid-table team, then I think there's, in terms of the pool of talent available, you have a lot more players available that you could pick from. But at the top levels, the air is very rarefied, so you don't find those players also. So that's another kind of thing that you have to look at. Like, I can only replace realistically maybe 2 players every window, like 2 starters every window. So you want to not leave too much to do in one window. And then then what happens is you bring in 4 players, all of them may be good, but they take 3 months to gel, which means you probably won't be challenging for the title, because nowadays the title winning team is going between 90 plus points, close to 100 sometimes. So the margins are low, so you don't have that time to say, I'm going to take 3 months to get all these guys going.
Okay, so if they were to close the deal for Trent Alexander-Arnold, which you assume they're trying to do, try and get a new contract on the table for him, then next summer they probably wouldn't want to get rid of Nunez, because they'd say, well, we've already got to replace Van Dijk and Salah, presumably.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting point then, because Arsenal have brought in 2 guys who might be starters for them already, right? Like Calafiori has arrived. We assume that he's going to start, given that the rival. There are a lot of players for that position at Arsenal, but they've spent a lot of money on him, and Zinchenko isn't trusted defensively. Kivior isn't trusted generally. Timber is out of position. Tomiyasu's never fit. It feels like that should be his position to get. And then Mikel Merino going into the midfield, it feels like he's the natural fit for that left 8 role. It's where he's been playing at Sociedad. It puts Rice back into the 6 role. It bumps Partey out of the 11, which is good for multiple reasons. That's already kind of 2 starters. So that might perhaps suggest why Arsenal weren't going so hard for the star attacker that Arsenal fans wanted. But do you agree with me that they have left themselves quite thin in attack?
Agree. Yeah. Yeah, I think an injury to Saka, or, I'm not wishing anything, but just kind of playing 65 games in a season. If you're 38 games plus 8 group games, and let's say Arsenal at least goes to a quarterfinal, semi-final, then you're adding another 6 games, and the 2 cup competitions, and we were like, yeah. So to play that many games. I think you do. And also Saka is one of the most fouled players. I don't know, in terms of ranking, maybe he's not number one, but he's definitely in the top 5 in the last few years. So like that to me seems like, I think we had this discussion off the air about the Saka position being the most kind of single point. So in software and systems, we call it like something, what we call a single point failure, meaning what is the weakest link or what is the weakest point of the system where if that fails, then the system fails. I think Arsenal, if you have to point out something, I think that right wing seems to be the spot.
Yeah, I think there's a story you can tell about them being able to deal with it somehow. Like, it depends when it happens. You know, if Saka goes out and it's relatively short term and it's an easier run of the season, maybe you're okay, because you know they can play Gabriel Jesus there. That's what they've been talking about. I'm not sure I love it, but like, he's a good player. And I also think Martinelli should be due a big season. I said this on Twitter and everyone went berserk because Arsenal fans hate Martinelli for some reason, or lots of them do, and I do not understand it, because his numbers have always been great. 2 years ago, he had 20 non-penalty goal involvements in the league, and last season the underlying numbers were just as good, and actually his carry numbers went insane. He went from kind of, I think he was at 2.3 carries into the penalty area. He went to like 3.7 last season per 90. It was nuts. And I thought, okay, well, this guy, he's also now 23. He's 23, Saka's 23, Saliba's 23. Like, this is an age where you would expect these youngsters to start putting it together more consistently, right? You know, it's before that you expect these kind of one step forward, maybe a step back, or a plateau season, and then another jump. 23, 24, this is now the beginning of peak age. So if Martinelli were to have a bigger season, or Jesus were to be fit for more of the season, Havertz had that slow start last year, you know, maybe he's more up to pace this year, that can help. But still, it's so strange to look at a team which did have the best underlying numbers in the league last year, that at the very least, you know, are going into this campaign thinking, well, we are second best, maybe we're kind of 1B in the team rankings, and to have left themselves so open to, you know, for want of a better term, shit happening. I don't know. It just seems very bizarre to me. But I agree with you that when we're talking about it, right wing is the issue, and yet we spent this whole summer, it feels, talking about strikers. Talking about Osimhen, now we're talking about Nunez. There was somebody else as well who currently eludes me. It feels like there's been a lot said about that position, and right wing seems to me to be the worry.
Well, I think, as to what you pointed out with Jesus playing there, deputizing. So I think maybe internally that their think tank feels that they are fine with the combined solution they have for that position. I think that what they see is maybe getting a different type of 9 gives them a different dimension to their attack against certain type of offenses or defenses. So I feel like that may be the prevailing thought among them.
And you made the point off air as well that Havertz played some left 8 minutes last season. Well, if Marino soaks up those minutes, then Havertz can kind of be redistributed, and so can Jesus across that front line, which helps a bit. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about is, my feeling is the sensible move for Arsenal was to try and improve their attack this summer, because last year they were the third best team in the league by expected goals, regardless of goals scored, where they were second. They were the third best by XG. They were about 76 XG. I think City were somewhere like 80, and Liverpool were at 87, which is hilarious. But they were the best defensive side in the league, 28 expected goals against over the course of the season. To me, it seems more likely that you can improve your attack when your attack is third best in the league than you can improve your defense when your defense is already the best in the league and very, very, very good. It feels like there's 5 XG difference that you can get on the attacking end rather than the defensive end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's always hard to break things down that way, and then
Sure.
and also like add to, I think in the Premier League at the top end of the table, just to add 1 xg for season, it's like the amount of money you need to spend could be astronomical.
Yeah.
So I think that there's probably some of that, and the other thing is also that that they look at availability of the talent as well, where obviously Osimhen has been available, but it's very expensive. It's again, there's the thing about like to make deals happen, there's multiple parties and opportunity has to be the right opportunity to do it. But I see your point that they, based on last year, their attack is the one that needed maybe like a better attack, they would have won the title over City. But I don't know if that's straightforward to separate
Sure.
it that way and then try to improve it.
Yeah. I mean, the one good thing, as we said, is they're the right side of the age curve, and maybe you just get things kind of going your way as a result. And of course, the thing we don't talk about, I guess it's harder to talk about, is the benefit of training. Like the way that a manager can tweak things to get more out of them, which is something that is really hard to tell when you're not behind the scenes, I suppose.
Yeah, and then like there's always, I mean, the soccer or football has so much of chance and variance involved season to season. So that's why just changing or even getting better player here and there might not immediately show up. Whereas, I think the question is going to be, we're going to have these same players for one more season in the attack, let's say, and it's one more season they're playing together. So how much of that is going to improve their ability to work together and create more, versus adding a new player who may be slightly better than one of the already established players, and and then the time that takes for him to get in sync with the rest of the group. So you have to weigh those two.
It's a really good point. What Wenger used to call like automatisms.
Automatisms. Yes, that's a good word.
Which it feels like Liverpool really got so much value out of when there was that point where they had that front line with Salah, Mane, and Firmino. There was a stage in there where it felt like the individual players were almost overrated, because it was more that the unit, how well they knew each other, how well they understood each other's position, and how easily they could find each other, was really the kind of X factor that made them the best attack, or one of the best attacks in the world, I guess.
Yep.
Shall we move on then to one more interesting transfer rumor, which is Mohamed Simakan, 24-year-old centre-back, right-back, hybrid, playing at RB Leipzig, now suddenly linked to Newcastle, which is interesting. Newcastle have obviously spent this entire window going to Crystal Palace saying, can we buy Guehi? And Palace say, how much? And Newcastle say a number, and Palace say 5 million more. And Newcastle come back the next day and say, okay, we'll give you that. And Palace say, no, 5 million more. And now we've gone from 50 million to 70 million, and it still isn't done. Frankly, to me, they should have switched targets earlier, though this is on the other side. This is very clearly on the right side. And Simakan is a really interesting prospect here. Do you not think? What do you think of him as a player, and I guess as a target for Newcastle specifically?
I think in terms of some of his qualities, forgetting the left-right side where he plays, if you take that out for a moment, I think as a player, I think he brings a lot more to Newcastle style that fits Newcastle style in terms of his physicality, athleticism, and the way he defends and plays to them than maybe Guehi. I think I can't separate Marc Guehi from his price. That's as the price increased from 50, I think at 50 we thought, okay, this is kind of, I think Ted mentioned this, it's like at the far end of the reasonable price range. I think it'll be an okay at that point. Now we're almost 50% more than that. Like I think today I read something about 75 is the new number. And I'm like, that's at 75, you're not getting somebody that's not good in the air, that can be iffy in 1v1, plays on the left side, but he's not like, he's a right-footed guy and Guehi at that price compared to Simakan, I feel that this makes more sense to me. I like the player a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's just when it comes to the allocation of their money, this just seems like eminently more reasonable. I mean, they do have some players here. You know, they've obviously got Kelly and Cher as the centre back slots, and then technically for right back, they've got Trippier, they've got Livramento, and they've got Emil Krap, who's still there. But Trippier's pretty old now. Livramento's still very young and has played both sides, but they spent an absolute fortune on him. You wonder if they would need to move somebody on to make this happen. But this is a guy who he's an above average passer. He's not a Trippier level passer, but I also think replacing Trippier's passing is less pressing given that Bruno didn't end up leaving this summer. He's pretty good in the air, lots of ball recoveries, defensive. The tackle success rate has gone up season after season, which feels like quite a good sign. And he's 24 years old. I mean, plus he's coming from a team who play an intense, aggressive pressing style. Going to a team playing an intense, aggressive pressing style.
Yeah, he takes very aggressive positions in terms of out of possession, like just to kind of cut out plays and, you know, sort of like wants to prevent danger before it kind of develops further. And he has the ability, if he misses something like a tackle or like something like that, he definitely has the pace to recover. I think that's good. The one thing I do slightly worry about him is that he's listed at 187 centimeters, so that's like roughly 6'2". I think that would be average height in the Premier League for center backs. So he may be a bit. I wouldn't call him undersized, but he would probably some of his aerial ability might be a little diminished because he's going up against stronger, more athletic players than he would on a day-to-day basis in the Bundesliga. And I think that also goes back to the fact that he's like the flex right back slash. So he has some qualities that obviously if he's 190, then it'll be harder to be that flex right back that is also aggressive, right? So it's kind of natural thing. So there is few concerns, but I do think that at the price compared to what Guehi's going to bring at what the price he's being quoted at, I think this feels a lot less risky.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking at this point for somewhere between a third and half of the Guehi price, which just feels it would leave them so much more money. And when you consider some of the stuff they've done this summer just to make PSR ends meet, you know, letting go of Minter, who would really have filled a position of need for them, letting go of Elliot Anderson, though they got a good fee for him. The weird, we're going to buy your crappy goalkeeper, Nottingham Forest, for an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
All this kind of dodgy stuff. It feels like if you spend a little bit less on players like this, then maybe you don't have to do that kind of nonsense next year or the year after. Yeah,
I'm really bummed about Minter for Newcastle. I think he's a really good player. Just watching him the first couple of games with Brighton, it just confirms that.
Yeah, and I think you look at him and you see his decision making against Manchester United. I thought was pretty bad. It was pretty kind of like I'm 19, 20. And yet you still look at him at the end of that game and I was like, oh, he carried the ball into the penalty area 7 times in this match and created a ton of dangerous situations. It's just, that is that incredible 1v1 ability and just danger.
And the directness into the goal, like that into the box, like, how he's direct. I think that those things have high value in my book.
But it's funny to me that, given that we were talking about attacking depth before, we talk about if you're Arsenal, maybe you look at Liverpool and think, oh God, well, if I'm Newcastle and I'm aiming for the top 4, I look at Brighton and I think, boy, they seem to have a lot of attackers who we could benefit from. They've got like 9 guys for 4 positions. This is incredible.
Yeah.
No, maybe they're an interesting outside bet for maybe not top 4, but if they finished up there, I don't think it would completely shock me.
Well, I guess a good thing to kind of see through the season is who finishes higher, Manchester United or Brighton. Like that may be a good kind of,
Yeah, the sheer amount of turnover in those squads. I mean, in Brighton, it's strange. Brighton have spent 200 million net, but it doesn't feel like it's created chaos. Whereas some teams add a ton of players and you think, yeah, well, we don't know how these guys are going to fit together because there's no established pattern of play. There's no established setup. Who knows how they're
Brighton
going to
have
work.
a new coach as well, right? Fabian Herzler. Yeah.
Yeah. It just speaks to the quality of their backroom work, I guess, that they're so well planned out.
Yeah.
I think that brings us to the end, Ravi, unless there's anything else that you wanted to cover.
Nothing, just I guess we can briefly mention Dani Olmo's debut for Barcelona. It took literally an arm and a leg, somebody's leg getting injured to get him registered, which was crazy. But I thought when he came on that was the easiest, like going into that halftime of that game against Athletic Club. Was that Athletic Club? There's so many matches I lose. Yeah, so it was pretty obvious that was going to be the sub, that Dani Olmo is going to come on and they're going to take out Ferran Torres and move Raphinha to the left. And the game changed on a dime. Like literally just every touch he made, almost, like maybe not every touch, but every other touch he had was creating danger. And you could see the moment he was on the pitch, that also freed up Pedri to attack, sometimes go into the box and create. And that's how, Pedri scored the first goal to equalize it 1-1. I don't think it was Athletic Club. I think it may have been a different team. So I have to look it up. But I thought he was really good. I think when we talked about him back in the day, when they were looking at Nico Williams and they said, well, we are not going to get Nico Williams, so we're going to get Dani Olmo. It felt like I think we were a bit critical of how much they were paying. I think our main points were about his availability. Like he is definitely somebody that's injury prone, misses a lot of games. Obviously, we didn't know that Raphinha could play the 10 so well the first couple of games, and then he moves to the left, and Dani Olmo comes in, and it all seems to work really well for them.
Yeah. It's annoying when good things happen to bad people.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about Barcelona.
It was Rayo Vallecano.
Yeah, for everybody who was screaming at us during that section, our producer Rishi, our resident Barcelona expert, jumped in to let us know that it was Rayo Vallecano. But yeah, for a guy who, I would say we like but don't adore, this has really become the Dani Olmo cast this summer, I've got to say.
He's had the assist on the first goal, and he scored the second goal, which was a nicely taken goal. And I think he's also created a couple more chances, and I think that was pretty good overall performance in 45 minutes. So it's, again, Barcelona looking really good on the field, but off the field they definitely they don't look as good. But with Hansi Flick, I think he's gotten them playing in a coherent way. That has always been the issue. Although they did suffer a big injury, like the 17-year-old Marc Bernal, who was playing as one of the two in the double pivot. He had an ACL. He was being very impressive the first 3 games so far. It's a huge bummer. But
it's interesting. Weird that we talk about how well run Real Madrid are behind the scenes and Barcelona being a mess, and yet in the early stage of the season, when it's on the field, Real Madrid are still are doing their early season. I wonder what we'll end up being when we win the Champions League by the end of this campaign. And Barcelona are chugging along already. But I was just going to wrap us up. Thank you very much for listening or watching. As I said at the beginning, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure that you follow us on Twitter. Make sure that you subscribe to the newsletter for all the best analysis. There'll be more podcasts over the next couple of weeks where we'll round up everything that's happened over the summer and probably start looking at what's going on for the season. We might be bringing you some interviews as well. Thank you, Ravi, for joining me. It's always good to hear your takes, even when it's we're talking about how Arsenal have not signed any attackers. Makes me a bit sad.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Patrick. Always fun to talk to you about football. See you again soon.
Yes.
Have a great holiday.
Soon. Oh, yeah, of course. I won't see you next week. I'm off on holiday, but I will be back in a couple of weeks, at which point you will be driving cross country. So it's going to be a period without one another, Ravi. All the best with your move.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. We'll catch all of you next time on the Transfer Flow podcast. See you later. Bye.